Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to FNN Sports Take with me, Kasey Hudson, your happy host on this week that felt like it just took forever to get to Friday, so TGIF for real this time. Per usual, we're going to kick off with some NFL news, and I'm getting so excited because each week that's going by, we're getting closer to just more and more sports conversation, digging in just a little bit deeper, so you guys know that hits my nerdy spot, and I'm really excited to dive into some football talk. So, NFL released some guidelines, some advice on how teams should conduct their training camps. We know that with most of these leagues now, setting training camp dates, setting return dates, all the action that's kind of back, we know that the NFL is going to have its moment. So for the most part, we hopped on a conference call with Bruce Arians about a week and a half ago at this point, and he mentioned a training camp date July 21st. Other people were saying July 28th, but we got the variation breakdown here. So between July 21st and July 28th, teams will be returning and conducting their training camp. Now, this is a little different than usual, obviously, because of COVID. Teams usually return a little bit later, first week of August. They're roughly about 15 to 21 days out from week one of the regular season. This year, they will be 47 to 48 days out from their first regular season game. Why it's going to vary between teams and possibly even divisions is depending on whether they have a Thursday night game, a Sunday game, or a Monday game. They want to get these guys an exact amount of time to return, get those extra weeks in because, everything has been super virtual. Some of the guys have finally started to find ways to get together safely, of course, but that didn't start taking place until a couple weeks ago, maybe a month at max. So they're going to get that extra time in there to refamiliarize themselves, make sure everybody is safe, make sure everyone's adhering to safety protocols. Now, the other thing that they were advising and saying is that they want players and coaches to possibly be coming into designated doors, separate doors, and then when they arrive at the facilities, they'll probably do a temperature check as well as screening questions. Of course, we know that most places that are still trying to adhere to safety protocol are doing temperature checks and screening. Have you been around anyone with symptoms? Do you have symptoms, et cetera, et cetera? Now, aside from that, they're asking that players wear masks around the facilities if they're doing anything that's not football related or non-football activities. Certain hallways will be asked to have designated one-way directions and then, of course, tape and explanations on the floor to say which way to travel and how to navigate through the hallways as well. They're asking that teams actually keep meetings virtual. Still, unless they absolutely have to meet in person, they want them to still hop on Zoom, have those calls in the evening or in the morning. If they must meet in person, they're saying that they advise them to go outside, keep it outdoors, and wear masks to get through the meeting. Now, of course, we know these guys have to be coming in and out of equipment rooms because hello, it's training camp. So when in the equipment room, no more than 15 players can gather at a time. When it comes to strength and conditioning workouts, there will be staggered. They'll try to keep them within their position group, of course, but even that might have to get broken down into more small groups as well. No more communal chalk in the bucket. And then the greatest challenge of all actually is going to be these locker rooms. Now, we know that in training camp, a lot of guys have an opportunity to prove themselves. Off season is usually more they bring in guys for more of a workout opportunity. They bring them in through training camp to see what they have, what they bring to the table, how they mesh, how they work in with their position group, how they work in with the team. And then as we know, as training camp persists, there's consistent cut downs on the roster. Well, the problem with that is that they usually just bring in a few temporary, well, not a few, but they bring in temporary lockers to add to the locker room. We already know if you've been in some of these locker rooms, just, how oddly they're kind of positioned or, structured. And on top of the fact that every guy is right on top of the next. Like, I know when we go in after the game to do interviews with these guys, you're sitting there trying to talk to this one particular player, but this one's throwing his gear on and off, and it's kind of getting caught over here. So it's very hectic. So I'm really interested to see how creative they get. Because what they want to do at the locker rooms is obviously adhere to the 6 feet social distancing, but that's going to be pretty hard in a lot of these locker rooms. So they are going to have to get creative in the sense of how they're going to do that, structure that out. And during training camp, you got a lot more guys on that roster at first. So trying to separate 6 feet apart, a 90-man roster is going to be tough. It might be a little bit more manageable when they cut down to 53, but that's probably going to be the biggest hurdle those guys have when it comes to training camp stuff. Now, teams must at all times have at least 2-week supply of PPE on hand. They don't want to have these guys in a position where they are, in short supply or they're waiting for something to happen or none of that. They have to have a minimum of a 2-week supply on hand. We know that the first 1 to 3 days of training camp is usually meetings. It's usually getting acclimated. They're going to have a lot of conversations right now in terms of, the new normal. But come day 4 and 5, players are allowed to wear light practice gear, no pads. Day 6 is a mandatory day off before day 7, which will be their first day in pads. So it's really exciting to just hear these conversations and guidelines. I know that, there's still players out there that they're not fully comfortable with it because guys spoke out to the fact that they play a contact sport. The most scary part, obviously, is the whole asymptomatic thing. And then what makes it worse is that whole second wave conversation is really picking up and taking heat. So, we haven't got an opportunity to really feel out where the players' heads are right now, but we know a lot of these guys are just ready to get back to their season. So to even be having these conversations and to have it dialed in that there will be a training camp is amazing. For the most part, I think that they can find a way to work it out. Like I said, everyone's kind of using soccer overseas as a reference point because they were the first ones to get back in action and kind of maneuver and figure out some new protocols and safety procedures to make sure that, they can play the game that they love and that they can give fans something to watch. So hopefully things continue to go well, and July 21st through the 28th get here fast. I'm just really excited to have football back. That's what I'm most looking forward to. Now for more football conversation, Browns are working on a major deal with Myles Garrett. We know that he is a dominant force on the field, and he wants to continue his career with the Browns. Well, he has 2 years left on his rookie contract after the Browns picked up the 5th-year option. He wants to have that jazzy deal, kind of similar to what Christian McCaffrey just worked out with the Panthers. He's hoping to stick around for at least 3 more years in Ohio. But, there's a couple guys that need to get paid before he does. And so we kind of discussed it either earlier this week or last week that the NFL has another big meeting coming up in terms of salary caps and the fact that they're going to have to restructure every team's salary cap due to COVID. We still have no idea where fans, if there's going to be an opportunity to really actually truly have fans in the stands. And even if they do get a chance to come back, we're talking at a 20% capacity. There's still going to be major revenue cuts taking place within every league, but especially the NFL. So when you're counting out a major percentage of revenue, when there's contracts that are finishing out that have to get those guaranteed payments, you're putting yourself in a really tight financial position. So I don't know how well these negotiations are going right now in terms of players trying to kind of figure this stuff out in the midst of all of it, but fingers crossed. But before they get to Myles Garrett, they need to sit down and have a chat with Denzel Ward, Baker Mayfield, and Nick Chubb. Once that takes place, then they can talk about keeping that dominant force on the field for 3 more years for the Browns. They can use him. I'm pretty sure they're going to make it work out. But other than that, they got to pay some other people first. And that's really tight financial state of mind that everybody's in at the moment. Now, conversation that's coming up. We haven't really chatted about this in a minute. And aside from the fact that I am a Tampa Bay girl, it's a very intriguing conversation as to how many perspectives really play a role in this. So people want to know, are Brady and Gronk still going to strike fear in every defense in the NFL? Look, obviously Brady's age comes up in the conversation, and then people worry about Gronk's health because, he wasn't doing too well. Then he took off a year. But in his intro press conference call, he really made a good point to say, look, first of all, I just kind of had this mentality to get things done. He was never listening to his body. Not only do a lot of young guys have that mentality, but people that are just, I don't know, not career obsessed or statistically obsessed, but it's more so like you're so trained to get out of your head and to work through so many different conditions that you're not realizing the domino effect until, it's too late or you're really starting to feel it. So yeah, a whole year off could have really been an advantage for him. Through the injuries that he has worked through, if you take a minute to Google and see all the injuries that Gronk has not only played through but recovered through, to think of the stats that he still put up through all of that, a healthy Gronk is going to be a scary Gronk. Not to mention is that maybe I'm taking it a little personally. That's fine. Call me out. But this isn't just going to be the Brady and Gronk show, guys. Like, we forget that Cameron Brate is one of the top tight ends on our team. Like, he has done a lot of work at the tight end position. OJ Howard hasn't even had a minute to get his feet wet yet. And Tanner Hudson showed that he has a lot of potential in the preseason, and he's going to be getting passes from Tom Brady, not Ryan Griffin, but Tom Brady. Nothing against Griff. But it's like, when you start putting all this together, it's not just the Brady and Gronk show. It's not them being the scary force. And let's just remove the tight end group from the whole conversation. We're talking about a 6'5", 220-something pound Mike Evans. Hello. We're talking about a Chris Godwin who runs a 4.42. We're also talking about a Scotty Miller who's going to be a similarity to a Julian Edelman and an Amendola, which we know what Brady does with players like that, standing at 5'11", who ran a 4.3. And then we're talking about Justin Watson, who also ran a 4.42. It's not the Brady and Gronk show anymore. This guy's got more than just one tight end. He's got more than just 3 weapons. There's a lot of weapons taking place on this offense. So you really want to dial in on all that before we ask, is there really a reason to be scared of the Bucs offense? Let's be serious. At this point, no. It's a lot of pressure to say the whole Super Bowl conversation. Realistically, let's just talk playoffs. They deserve to be in playoffs this year. This is going to come down to coaching all in all, because you have all the tools now. Think about how much work was put in the 2019 season and how many close calls took place. But no offense, the quarterback was turning over the ball in critical positions. The defense was worn down because they were on the field way too much. And look at the depth we have on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. Hello. There's a lot of opportunity here outside of the Gronk and Brady show. So I just had to put that in perspective, because that's all I've been hearing is, well, do we think? Well, do we think? No, you got to go down the roster and see how much potential is really standing here. I mean, Gronk first coming into the league ran a 4.68, and he's a big boy. That's a big tight end to have out there. Then think of the other options you have with this tight end group. These guys can put their hand in the dirt and actually create a run game for us, finally. Now, we all know I wanted a big back out there, because you need that guy who's going to drive those extra yards and cannot be swept off his feet like this is Dirty Dancing. But now that we have better protection out there, they're working on the O-line, you have tight ends you can rely on to block. Now we can probably gain some more momentum in a run game as well. So we're not putting too much heat on our QB either. That's my argument and my debate with the Brady and Gronk show. It's amazing that they're here, guys, but there's so many other people on this roster that are going to get the job done. And for me, I'm more excited to see Brady connect with Godwin and Evans. We know that Evans is going to be marked very heavily too, so he's got to make sure that he extends his options in those playbooks to use these other guys like Scotty Miller and Justin Watson. Now, Arians did mention running more 12 personnel. He likes the idea of having 4 wide receivers on the field, and he loves the idea of having 3 tight ends out there as well. So it will be interesting to see how many options this offense has to really make progress down the field. But again, I think we can at least talk playoffs. We don't have to jump to the Super Bowl, but just yet. But just keep them in mind. Now, for other conversation for NHL, kind of lastly as well, NFL owners pledged to donate $250 million over a 10-year period. Granted, a lot of people are still unpleased with this. They want to know, is this now just money masking a situation, or is this actually going to, help and make progress somewhere? Look, everyone has to start somewhere, and I don't think they're trying to blindly pay off any kind of situation or throw money at it in a blind manner. I don't know what more people really want to hear. So this is something we can kind of open a platform to just kind of get some feedback on. Does it still feel displeasing or disgenuine that there's now being money, quote unquote, tossed at the situation over a 10-year period? It's something progressive. So I need more education and feedback on this so I can understand where the displeasing part continues to be. But other than that, that's the biggest update when it comes to the NFL. We're going to quickly hop over to NCAA football. We know that college football had a little push and shove in order to figure out their season, but not only did they make some progress and they're diving in, they got a 6-week preseason practice plan of mandatory workouts, including walkthroughs, discussed and got the ball rolling on that. The NCAA football committee approved it on Thursday to prepare a complete start time, and then they just have to go through final approval this coming Wednesday. So we will have more information about that. They should be fully returning and starting to adhere to this 6-week plan come mid-July. When we get more information, you guys will get more information. As for other big news when it comes to college athletes in general, our Florida governor, DeSantis, signed the bill allowing college athletes to be paid for their name, their image, and their likeness. So that's a big deal because we discussed just a little bit the fact that, it's been back and forth whether student athletes deserve to make money outside of the scholarships and the grants that they're given. Yes, that's such a blessing. We get that. But they don't have time to have that job to put the extra money in their pocket for when the kitchen is closed or for when they want to go do things with their friends when they finally have a minute to. That's important stuff. And just as a general college student, we know how much work it is to have 5 to 6 classes, go to work, find time to have a social life in between, and, not call your parents for money all the time. Not to mention is that you don't want them checking your bank account to see what you're actually buying. So yeah, these guys deserve to have a little bit of extra money in their pocket. So that's a big deal for student athletes, and I hope that they make more progress there and that, they get to realistic pricing outside of the whole image, jerseys, whatever. Now, this raises a big question for me. There are guys who are in the professional realm of their career right now who are going through legal matters that have to do with jerseys being sold with their name on it and getting money for their name, their image, and their likeness. Will these cases maybe cease and desist? Will they get an easier dismissal of it? What will happen with these open cases right now as a bill like this gets signed through? Now, it's only in Florida at the moment, but I'm sure this progress is going to translate over into other states, at least most. So what do you guys think? Should some of these guys get off from the situation if they're dealing with any legalities that has to do with this new bill? Or should they have to pay off the consequences because they weren't a part of that time? I would love to hear you guys' feedback on all of that. Stick with us as we hit a quick commercial break and we come back talking some NHL and NBA.
All this time we fought side by side. We trained together. We lost together. And now, you're the only one standing in my way. It's been a while, old friend.
All right, guys, welcome back. So for NHL news, they officially set a training camp date, July 10th. The funny part about this is when they initially kicked around the idea of when they may do training camp, they said July 10th, and then they said, ho, don't hold us to that. Let's not make this an affirmed date, and it ended up being that anyway. So now they got the ball more and more rolling. We know that they're getting ready to break down what phase 3 is going to look like. And the biggest thing so far is that phase 2 took place top of this week. The guys were able to get back into facilities in small groups, no bigger than 6. We got to talk to some of the guys from the Lightning. Now here's the other thing. A lot of players and other teams are not in their market. They're not around. And for sports world, at least it's been confirmed to me by sources that they are going to have these guys adhere to quarantine regulations when they come back to any city because they have to be sure that nothing is spreading as they are in the midst of reopening everything. Well, where does that leave the guys who are not by their home team or who are still 14 to 21 days out from being able to hop into action with their teammates? They got a little creative. If you've seen Ovechkin is here in Florida, and he decided to pick up some random other NHL players, probably between the Florida Panthers and maybe some Lightning guys. I don't know, but they're getting together in small groups down south in those facilities. So the guys are trying to find whoever they can right now just to hop back on the ice and get that familiarity back, which is cool. But for the most part, these guys said, skating is like riding a bike. It was very easy to hop back on the ice. They might be a little extra sore right now, but they're just extremely happy to finally be functioning in a practice capacity that's going to pay off. Rollerblading down Bayshore, it's nice to get your blood pumping, but it still doesn't really translate to how much work these guys really put in on the ice. So it's cool to see the NHL getting the wind beneath their wings, picking up. Now for the NBA, we've got training camp guidelines that kind of got leaked out little by little around June 1. Now, we've said this plenty of times before. When it comes to the NBA, it runs very parallel to how the NHL is run, how many games, how they do their playoffs, how they do their whole system. The only difference right now is that NHL will be doing a full playoff where the NBA is now doing tournament style that some guys are still at a cross at. Now, they're going to do a 2-week recall of players kind of like the NHL. At this point, the NHL is telling these guys, all right, get back to your market so that we can start figuring out where to go from here. Same thing's going to happen with NBA. These guys need to return to their markets. If some of them need a quarantine, they're going to quarantine. They're obviously going to get checked for any symptoms. Yada, yada, yada. They will actually have a mandatory period of quarantine in the NBA versus anything that has been discussed in the NHL. 1 to 2 weeks of individual training and workouts, and then 2 to 3 weeks of formal training camp. We know the NBA is heading down to Orlando, and as exciting as that was to have NBA officially back and for us to get all the information that we're going to have a season. And then we talked about a few players coming out saying, well, they're hesitant on the return, if it's worth their time, if it's worthwhile. Now there's a whole another issue kind of popping up. It's not, is it worth their time to play a certain amount of games? It's not, is it worth their time to do the tournament style? Now, 40 to 50 players, to be specific, on a conference call within the last 24 hours came forward to say, we don't really like the idea of living in a bubble for the next couple of months. They won't be able to see their families. They don't like how the family situation is being broken down, because the easiest thing to do with something to this magnitude is just to say no visitors. Well, they want that to be a more negotiable point, and at this point, they don't know if they can really have those conversations, because if your families do come down, they can't really have a complete eye on their whereabouts while you're at practice, while you're at workouts, while they're bored in their hotel room. And they can't be sure that they're not going to go shopping and rub shoulders with the wrong person and then come back and then you have it. And then it's a lot of moving pieces to manage. So I get it. It is frustrating. As an athlete, naturally, you guys sacrifice so much, but it's like you wanted the season. We're in the midst of a serious virus, and we're trying to find the best way to go about giving everybody what they want. But, the family part's only half the new battle. The next part of it is that these guys don't want to be living in a bubble for the next couple of months, because part of the negotiables that's being discussed is that these guys will not be able to leave the Walt Disney facility area grounds, however you want to refer to it. They will be literally stuck there and only there until they wrap up their final game to go back home to where they belong. That's the part that I can understand being a little suffocating. But again, so many moving pieces. If you give people this much freedom, you have to count on 10% of those guys taking this much freedom. And then before you know it, it's a whole situation. So we'll see what came of that conference call that took place. But yeah, it's definitely more than 4 players having an issue. And it was only 4 players really just saying, hey, I'm still kind of coming off of injury recoveries. Maybe it's not the best idea to hop into a tournament style situation. I'll just let my body recover and prep for 2020 to 2021 season. Whereas now 40 to 50 players are not liking the terms and negotiations in order to have a season at all. So we will see what sources say about this at the top of next week and translate it back to you guys. No names were released in terms of who any of the 40 to 50 players were, and there's no formal petitioning taking place. Of course, guys are just expected to step forward and voice their opinion and their feelings about everything that's taking place. Now for MLB. There was supposed to be no counteroffer. We're now going on counteroffer number 3. MLB is to now counteroffer propose 70 to 75 games. We did discuss on Wednesday that it is a safety hazard to have more than 75 games at this point in time. They're going to have to push back what their training return time was going to be and what the new opening day date was going to be. They were supposed to already be practicing and having their training camp to have an opening day date of July 4th or 5th. That is no longer going to be able to work out. It's past crunch time. But the problem that MLB PA is having, along with discussing, talking to the owners, talking to the players, is the fact that they are seriously adhering to a second wave guidelines. In other words, they do not want their season interrupted by COVID-19 2.0 because it's going to cost them a lot. And they're already going through a lot of financial issues. They're struggling to still negotiate the pay to the players because the 50-50 revenue split was an absolute not. The 70-30 was not good enough. They somewhat counter-offered doing a prorated full salary, but now they're saying they truly don't even think they can offer that. That it's not a realistic situation. I don't know what's going to take place with MLB, but the player, I don't know. I don't know who has to meet whom in the middle, but at this point, again, they're beyond ran out of time. everything's already going to get pushed back. So I don't even know if 75 games can truly work out because they're 2 weeks behind where they thought they would already get the ball rolling. They can't afford to have their season interrupted, and they said that it would be extremely costly if they interrupted postseason. So you have to remember, they're not counting on having that fan portion of revenue at all just yet. That's up in the air talk and hopeful, wishful conversation. The union is obviously still split on full prorated salary, and a light note in the midst of all of this is that we know that the MLB draft took place a couple days ago, and the Mets drafted a 2-time cancer survivor out of the University of New Orleans. He overcame testicular cancer and skin cancer. That is something to marvel at, especially when you play a sport that's predominantly outdoors. There's a few cool indoor stadiums for baseball, but for the most part, these guys are out there. So he's playing with no fear. He's going after life with no fear. And I'm sure for him, he's not even worried too much about how much he'll be making. When you fight a battle like that, you're just ready to get out there and play with passion. So that had to be the light note on top of all the MLB conversation. Congratulations to him on his draft to the Mets. And, I hope that we get an opportunity to see him out there this season as well as next. Stick with us, guys. We hop to another quick commercial break and we break down some soccer, and more soccer.
I'm not picking it up. You pick it up.
I'm not picking it up.
Well, somebody's got to pick it up.
I'll pick it up. They're clean. 'Cause my hand is clean. Oh yeah, I'm Charmin Clean. That's how I know they're clean.
Charmin Ultra Strong is woven like a washcloth and just cleans better.
Yeah, I'm Charmin Clean.
The kid does have a point.
My hand is clean. Yeah.
Enjoy the go with Charmin. And for an extra clean finish, try Charmin Flushable Wipes.
All right, guys, welcome back. So MLS across the pond. We got a lot of soccer to talk really quick. MLS, we know, got their full approval back in action. Soccer will be kicking off in Orlando as of July 8th. How did they get to this position? How did they get here to finally get the season back? Well, finds out that players actually gave up over $100 million in economic concessions. That's sacrifice when you actually want to play the game that you love and get back to business. So that's great that they were able to come to an agreement and find a way to work that all out. If you guys remember me mentioning that was kind of a big deal for them, because it was also a big deal in February that CBA-wise, it was announced that these players were about to get more money. They make nothing compared to European soccer players. They were about to make more money. Their contracts were about to be a lot heftier, and that was all supposed to roll out through 2025, and then it was supposed to really take off. Well, now they have to take these revenue cuts. They have to kind of play for less through 2025 and then potentially renegotiate those fancy terms that we discussed in February 5 years down the line. So, it gets to a point where you just got to figure out, do you want to play more than you want to negotiate, and is something better than nothing? But other than all of that, we're just happy to have soccer back. Now, the fun part, the groups were drawn. Group A, we get to see the tournament open up July 8th in Orlando, Florida, with International Miami FC in Orlando City Soccer. This has me all the way in my feelings. Like, all the way in my feelings. First of all, I grew up playing soccer. For anybody who knows me personally or knows of me through anything through social media, so you guys know I do love my soccer. Not only that, my first kind of, aside from covering the Bucks, the first stuff that I ever did sports broadcasting wise was with Orlando City Soccer. So it was amazing to even have real, like close to real Euro soccer fields in Florida, in Orlando at that. And then this season, we were supposed to be covering International Miami FC, which is David Beckham's team. Now, I don't know anybody who doesn't love soccer and isn't obsessed with David Beckham, but I don't know any girl who isn't obsessed with David Beckham. So clearly, I was extremely happy to be covering International Miami FC. Either way, who I'd be rooting for, we won't know. I might even get a fancy little jersey crafted up that's half and half like parents do for House Divided. But I'm so excited that we are kicking off on such an exciting note. It's going to be great to see how this all ends up working out. And I'm not going to lie, Orlando might take it. International Miami FC was struggling to find their footing. Their first couple of games weren't the most beautiful playouts on the pitch. But you know what? Everyone's got to start somewhere. The final game for this tournament style that MLS is doing will be August 11th. So, of course, we will be bringing you guys all the breakdown, all the news, and at least we will have games and stats to dive into when this tournament takes off. So I guess that's the other reason I'm just extremely excited. We're going to finally be able to have some game conversation and not just general updates. We're going to dive into some stats. We're going to dive into some analytics because that's my favorite part of sports. Now, for other soccer, Premier League clubs approve game protocols. They're finally getting that much closer yet again, but they have a perfect example to go off of. German soccer is going very well. They're in the middle of one of their cups. Bayern is heading to the finals. Woohoo. And then what we just found out as well is that Premier League soccer, as well as La Liga, which has officially returned as well, will be using crowd noises. So those discussions in terms of having fans has ceased and desist, because if you've seen the size of those stadiums, that is a lot to have to manage. So they're going to use crowd noises to give the guys all the feels, but for the most part, there is no discussion of fans returning when it comes to Euro soccer, but those guys are very excited just to get back to it. Premier League didn't even think that they were going to honestly be able to make a return because those negotiations were just not going well at all. In other soccer news, Megan Rapone gets an apology from the soccer league saying, you know what, we didn't take a minute to actually understand where you were coming from in terms of kneeling during the national anthem. They said after taking a minute to take a step back and educate themselves, they now have a better understanding, and they offered her a full apology as to ever questioning why she was kneeling and what she meant by kneeling, now that they have a better understanding. So that's always great. Progress is great. For golf, PGA has their grand return, and it was extremely exciting because they said absolutely no fans, but they had some people still huddling around the green trying to get, that little peek, that view, because three of their top players in golf right now were out there. Rory McIlroy, John Ram, and Brooks Koepka. I mean, hello, who doesn't want to try to get a quick sneak peek as to what's going on the green when these three guys are out there, especially because for Rory, he hasn't even been able to play in the Charles Schwab Challenge. He's usually playing in a European tournament. So because of the travel restrictions that are still kind of in play, a lot of these guys have an opportunity to be a part of games, tournaments, and, charity events that they haven't been able to do in years, if ever. So that was amazing for them. They also did a moment of silence at 8:46 a.m. in remembrance of George Floyd, and to show their standing and their backing of everything progressively taking place in our nation. All right, guys, that is it for me tonight. I hope everyone has an amazing and a safe weekend. I know that most things are back open. I know that people are starting to get their lives back, but let's still be safe. Let's still be smart. And if nothing else, be compassionate and be kind. And I'll catch you guys Monday at 8 p.m.